Somewhere in a basement in America tonight, a washing machine built in 1984 is going to finish a spin cycle, shudder once the way it always has, and go quiet, ready for tomorrow. It has done this maybe 6,000 times. It has never seen a repairman. The family that owns it has moved twice, and both times, the movers were told, "Whatever you do, do not drop the washer." And upstairs, or in some other house just like it, there is a new machine, a beautiful one, with a drum lit up like a spaceship and a screen on the front, and it is dead. 6 years old. The man who came to look at it said the part it needs is welded inside another part, and the honest thing to do is buy a new one. Every family in this country has some version of this story. My mother's Maytag ran 30 years. My grandmother's Whirlpool went 35, and they sold the house with it still working. Dad bought it the year I was born, and it outlived him. And we tell these stories half as jokes, because the alternative is asking the question seriously. What happened? Where did the 30-year washing machine go? It was real. It was not a legend, and it was not luck. They built millions of them, and then, inside of one generation, they were gone. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly what happened to them. There are 5 reasons. One of them is partly your fault and mine. One of them is the fault of nobody at all. And the last one is not about machines. It is about your grandmother and her Mondays, and a debt this machine owed her that no other machine in the house ever owed anyone. But first, the proof. Because there is a voice in your head saying memory flatters the past, that people only remember the machine that survived. So consider what repair technicians, the least sentimental people in America, say when you ask them about the old machines. They do not get misty, they get specific. They talk about the belt drive Maytags from the 60s and 70s, gray enamel, built in Newton, Iowa, machines they still find in farmhouses, still on their first transmission. They talk about the direct drive Whirlpools and Kenmores, built from the early 80s into the 2000s, and they use a word engineers are not supposed to use, immortal. A machine so simple and so overbuilt that when something finally did wear, it was usually a little coupler that cost $10 and changed out in 20 minutes on a kitchen floor. Millions of those machines are still running right now, in basements and garages, 3rd owner, 4th decade. And in the comments under videos like this one, people file their evidence like courtroom exhibits. A set from 93, 33 years, all original. A Maytag from 77, Dad's, still going. A Kenmore that did 27 years on 2 repairs. Nobody is imagining this. The 30-year washer existed, and it was ordinary. And for millions of families, it arrived the same way. It came from Sears. You picked it out of the catalog, or walked the appliance aisle at the store where your family bought everything, and it said Kenmore on the front. And what almost nobody knew was that Kenmore never built a single machine. Behind the badge, most of those washers were Whirlpools, the same immortal direct drive machine wearing the store's name. Sears put a washing machine in more American basements than any company in history, and stood behind them with a parts counter in every town, and that is its own kind of ghost story now, because Sears is gone, and the parts counters are gone, and the machines are still running. The store died before the washers it sold. Sit with that one for a second, because it may be the purest proof in this whole video. The retailer collapsed, the brand became a sticker, an entire American institution went to dust, and down in the basement the machine it delivered in 1989 just finished another load. Now put the new one beside it. The washing machine you buy today has an expected life of about 10 years, and plenty do not see 8, because somewhere around year 6 or 7, a bearing starts to sing, and the bearing is sealed inside a part that costs more than the machine is worth. So the collapse is real. A machine that used to serve a family for a generation now barely serves a mortgage, and it happened for 5 reasons, stacked one on top of another. The first one is the hardest to hear, because the first thing that changed was not the machine. It was us. Here is the number that reframes everything. In 1949, Maytag introduced its first fully automatic washer, and it cost $279.95. The median American family that year earned about $3,100. Sit with that math. A washing machine cost a family very nearly 5 weeks of income. In today's money, that is a purchase north of $3,500. And families made it anyway, they saved for it, they financed it, and when it arrived, the neighbors came to see it run. Demand was so fierce that Maytag had to open a second plant just to keep up. Now look at the machine you bought. A standard washer today runs $600 or $700, and the median household earns about $80,000. That is not 5 weeks of pay. That is 2 days. Measured in the hours a person works to earn one, the washing machine has become roughly 10 times cheaper than the one your grandmother bought. And here is the part that stings. Nobody took the 30-year washer away from us. We traded it, standing in the store, decade after decade, choosing the cheaper one, and the market did what markets do. It listened. The manufacturers did not forget how to build a 5-week of wages machine. We stopped ordering them. Her washer lasted 30 years, partly because she paid for 30 years. We pay for 10, and with 2 exceptions I will get to before the end. 10 is what they sell us. But the price only explains the will. To understand the machine itself, you have to look at what a company builds when a family is trusting it with 5 weeks of pay. And the answer, in Newton, Iowa, was that they built it like farm equipment, because they were farm equipment people. Here is the detail that explains the entire old machine. The Maytag company did not start out making washers. It started in 1893 making attachments for threshing machines, equipment that had to survive Iowa harvests, mud, and a farmer's patience. The washing machine began as a side product to keep the factory busy in the off-season, and it was designed by the same hands, to the same standard, which is why the thing is built the way it is. A cast metal transmission, gears cut from steel, running in oil, like a truck, a porcelain-coated steel tub, a motor loafing along at a fraction of what it could bear. Engineers of that era did not design down to a price. They designed up to a load, then added margin. And a machine that spends its whole life loafing is a machine that does not wear out. The famous direct-drive whirlpools worked the same way. So simple, there was almost nothing in the cabinet. And what was there was oversized for the job. Put your hand on one of those machines mid-cycle sometime. It does not vibrate. It thrums, low and even, like something with a big, lazy heart. The new machine next to it is thin steel and plastic, a tub you can flex with your thumb, and a small, hard-working motor tuned to the edge of its ability. Lighter, quieter, far cheaper to build. Sprinting, its entire life. But the deepest change is not the metal, and it is not the motor. It is a decision that got made about 20 years ago, far from any laundry room, that quietly redesigned every washing machine in America. They decided to take out the water. Around the early 2000s, new efficiency standards began pushing washers to use as little water and power as possible. And there were honest reasons, which I will get to, because they matter. But understand what that decision did to the machine. A washing machine cleans by moving fabric through water. The old agitator, that post in the middle your grandmother's machine had, turned a full tub over and over, and it scrubbed. When the water went away, the agitator had to go too. There was nothing left for it to stir, and in its place came the impeller, a low plate that wobbles at the bottom of a nearly dry drum, rubbing the clothes against each other and hoping. Cycles stretched from 40 minutes to an hour and a half, because time was the only thing left to make up for the missing water. Lids started locking so you could not toss in a stray sock, and on the front loaders, the whole machine got sealed behind a rubber gasket that sits warm and damp in the dark and grows the smell that half of you watching know all too well. Then, to manage all this scarcity, the machines got brains, sensors to weigh the load, boards to time the locks, software to choreograph a wash that used to be choreographed by 8 inches of water and a steel post. The old machine had maybe 5 things that could fail, and every one cost a few dollars. The new one carries dozens, and the most expensive one is in charge of all the others. They took out the one part that always worked and bolted on 10 that don't. That is not an accident of progress. That is the shape of it. And when one of those new parts fails, something happens that would have baffled your grandmother, and it is the 4th reason, and it is the one with a broken heart in the middle of it. In 1967, an ad agency invented a character to sell Maytags, a repairman called Ole Lonely, the loneliest man in town, sitting in his little shop with nothing to do, because the machines never broke. An actor named Jesse White played him for 21 years. They even gave him a basset hound named Newton, after the Iowa town where the washers were built. And the campaign ran for 4 decades and became one of the most famous in television history. For one reason, the country recognized him. Everybody's town had that man, the appliance man, the fellow whose name your mother knew, and everybody knew the joke was true. The machines really did not break, and when they finally did, he came out, and a $3 part later, the 30-year machine started its second act. Repair was cheap, the machine was precious, so everything was built to be opened. Now run the math in today's laundry room. The service call costs more than $100 before a tool comes out. The failed part is a control board, $300 or $400, or a bearing, $40 of steel, welded inside a tub assembly that costs $400, and the machine itself costs $600 new. So the honest technician stands there and says the sentence that ends the story: it is not worth fixing. The machine was precious, and the repair was cheap. Now the machine is cheap, and the repair is precious. Flip those two numbers, and you flip the fate of every appliance in the house. And you can see the flip written right into the sheet metal. The old machines were built expecting to be opened. Lids that popped with a putty knife, cabinets that unbolted in minutes, a wiring diagram folded up and glued inside the back panel like a note from the factory to some future repairman it had never met, saying, "Here, you will need this." Some of them even stamped the part numbers into the parts. The machine assumed a long life, full of small rescues, and it dressed for it. The new machine assumes a short life and one trip to the curb, and it dresses for that. Glued seams, welded assemblies, and a board whose diagram is a company secret. You can read a manufacturer's honest opinion of its own machine by checking whether it expected anyone to ever look inside. And the ending of the Maytag story tells you exactly when the flip finished. In 2006, Whirlpool bought Maytag, and within weeks announced it was closing Newton, the headquarters, the plants, the town's whole reason. The lonely repairman stayed on television, selling dependability for a company that had just buried the company that earned it. The joke only worked because it was true. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being true, and the ads kept running. And that, right there, is the whole story of American appliances in one image. A repairman with nothing to fix, because the machines are not worth fixing anymore. Which brings us to the 5th reason, and I owe you honesty here, because this is the reason where the old machine loses. And it loses on the one scorecard your grandmother herself would have respected. The old washer was a glutton. There is no way around it. A traditional top loader filled that big tub twice every load, wash and rinse, and drank 40 gallons or more each time. And most of the heavy lifting was done with hot water, which means every load was also burning fuel in the water heater. A family running 300 loads a year was pouring over 12,000 gallons through that machine, year after year. The modern high-efficiency washer does the same family's laundry on a third of the water, spins so fast the dryer barely has to work, and sips power. Multiply that by 100 million households, and you are talking about rivers, real power plants, especially in the dry states, where this argument is not abstract at all. So the standards were not villainy, they were arithmetic, and the engineers genuinely delivered on them. But you cannot get a machine that frugal by overbuilding it and letting it loaf. You get it by engineering everything thin, light, sensor run, and tight to the edge. The old machine wasted water for 30 years. The new one saves water for 10. Cheap to run and cheap to die turned out to be the same design, and nobody ever sat any of us down and asked which trade we wanted. And before we leave the how, one more thing, and it is the twist that proves every word I have said so far. The 30-year washing machine never actually died. It just stopped being sold to you. Walk into any laundromat in America tonight and look at the machines. Heavy, plain, steel, mechanical, no screens, no apps, and they are getting hammered. 8, 10 loads a day, by strangers, with overloaded comforters and forgotten crayons. Year after year after year. Those machines survive abuse your home washer will never see. For decades. Because a laundromat owner does the math a family stopped doing. His machine is his income. Every day it is broken, he loses money, so he will not buy a machine designed for the curb, and because he will not, somebody still builds the other kind. Commercial grade, overbuilt, loafing, repairable. The old religion, alive and well and coin-operated. The engineering was never lost. The knowledge never went anywhere. The 30-year washer is still rolling off a line right now, in Wisconsin, and it goes wherever the buyer refuses to accept a disposable machine. Which tells you the only thing that ever really changed. Not the factories, not the engineers, the customer. When a buyer demands 30 years is still for sale. We just stopped demanding it at home. So that is what happened to the 30-year washing machine. The price, the farm equipment steel, the water, the repair math, the efficiency trade, and a customer who moved on. 5 reasons and a mirror, and not one true villain in the bunch. But none of that touches the real question, the one under all the others. Why do people talk about these machines the way they talk about family? Because with this machine, and only this machine, that is almost exactly what it was. To understand what the washing machine actually did, you have to stand in a backyard on a Monday morning, about 100 years ago. They called it Wash Day, and in half the country they called it Blue Monday, and it was the hardest day of the week in nearly every house in America. And it belonged, almost everywhere, to the women. Start before breakfast. Haul the water, 40, 50 gallons, bucket by bucket, from the pump or the well. Build the fire, boil the whites in a copper kettle, and stir them with a stick like soup. Scrub every piece against a ridged board with lye soap that ate the skin off your knuckles. Wring it all by hand, or feed it through the mangle, those 2 rollers with a crank. And every woman knew someone who had caught a hand or a sleeve in one, which is where that old warning about getting caught in the wringer comes from. It was not a figure of speech. It was Monday. Then haul it all out and hang it, and iron on Tuesday, and do it again every week of your life, from girlhood to the grave. Historians estimate Wash Day ate 7-8 hours of brutal physical labor, weekly, for centuries. And if you want proof of how completely that day ruled life, it is hiding in a song you already know. Here we go round the mulberry bush. The old verses assign the whole week, and Monday's verse is, "This is the way we wash our clothes, so early Monday morning." Children were taught the shape of a woman's week in a nursery rhyme. Wash on Monday, iron on Tuesday, mend on Wednesday, and generations sang it in circles, without ever thinking about what it meant, that the calendar itself had been organized around the weight of wet laundry. It bent backs. It aged hands. Your great-grandmother's hands, the ones in the old photographs, folded in her lap. Some of that is Wash Day. And then, in one generation, a machine took that day and handed it back. There is a famous story a Swedish doctor used to tell about the day his family got their first washing machine, in the 50s. His grandmother came over for the occasion, took a chair, and sat in front of the little round window for the entire cycle, watching, mesmerized. To her, it was not an appliance. It was a miracle, eating the worst day of her life. There are serious economists who argue the washing machine changed the world more than the internet did. And here is the case in one sentence. It handed hundreds of millions of women a full working day, every week, for the rest of their lives. And much of the century that followed, women stepping into schools and jobs and public life, runs partly on the time this one machine gave back. Your grandmother did not keep her Maytag for 30 years because she was frugal. Or not only. She kept it the way you keep something that changed your life. She wiped it down. She knew its sounds. She called the repairman by his first name the 2 times she ever needed him. The machine repaid her with Mondays, and she repaid the machine with 30 years of care. And here is how you know the machine got all the way inside a family. The same test that works on any childhood, the sound. Ask anyone who grew up in a house with one of those old machines, and they can still play the whole recording from memory. The rattle of the dial as it turned, that heavy mechanical click, 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 and the deep clunk when it caught the cycle. The groan of the fill, the lid slam, and their mother's voice about the lid slam. The off-balance thump 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 from the basement that made somebody yell, "The load's walking," and whoever was closest went down to shove the towels around. And under all of it, on 1,000 ordinary afternoons, that low, steady churn coming up through the floor, which meant, without anyone ever saying it, that somebody was home, and somebody was taking care of things. Plenty of grown people cannot fall asleep in a perfectly quiet house to this day, and some of them will tell you the truest white noise they ever knew was a washing machine 2 rooms away. That is not an appliance anymore. That is the soundtrack of being looked after. That is the debt I mentioned at the beginning. Every washing machine since owes its place in the house to what the first one did for her. The old machines were built like they knew it. The new ones are built like they've forgotten. So stand in front of the old machine in the basement now, the 84, mid-cycle, thrumming that low even note, and understand what you are actually looking at. A fossil, from a different deal between people and their things, when objects were expensive and time was cheap, so you bought once, repaired, kept, handed down. And a receipt for the largest gift any machine ever gave an American family. The 30-year washer is not coming back. Not really. The world that ordered it. 5 weeks of pay, water without counting, a repairman in every town, is gone. And parts of that world we are honestly better off without. But the middle is still there for the taking. A couple of companies never stopped building the old way. Simple, agitator, mechanical, built in the same Wisconsin town for over a century. And the plainest machines on the floor are still the closest living relatives of the one in your grandmother's basement. Buy simple. Fix the $40 part. Keep a machine 20 years, in this economy, and you have committed a quiet little act of rebellion. She would not have called it rebellion. She would have called it Monday, handled. And if you have the old machine still, the 84 in the basement, the 77 in the garage, hear this part clearly, because it is the one practical thing in this whole video. Do not let anyone talk you out of it. When a belt goes, or a coupler, or a pump, those parts still exist. They cost less than a dinner out, and there are 1,000 videos showing exactly how to change them, filmed by people who love these machines the way other people love old trucks. A 30-year machine that gets one $40 part becomes a 40-year machine, and the man in the orange apron will never tell you that, because there is nothing on his shelf for a customer who fixes things. Every year you keep it running, you are casting the only vote the industry actually counts. Somewhere tonight that machine from 1984 finishes its spin, shudders once, and goes quiet, ready for tomorrow, the way it has 6,000 times. And when it finally does stop for good, some ordinary afternoon, somebody in that family is going to stand in the basement feeling something they did not expect to feel about a washing machine. Let them feel it. It earned it. So here is what I would love from you. Go down to the comments and write it, the brand and the year. Her Maytag from 77, the Whirlpool that came with the house, the set from 93, still on the original everything. Write it like it deserves to be written down, because it does, and read the others while you are there. Because that comment section is going to fill up with 30-year machines and the people who kept them, and it will be better than anything I said here. Share this with somebody who grew up to the sound of one. And subscribe if you want more of the stories behind the machines we grew up with. Somewhere, a load just finished. Go get it before it wrinkles. She would.